Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Joe Sweeney. I am Associate Director of Admissions here at Notre Dame's Mendoza College of Business. I'm joined today by one of our career coaches who focuses especially on marketing, Scott Scheibel. And we're going to talk you through some careers in marketing. Glad you've joined us. A couple quick technical notes for you. Please, as we go through the presentation, feel free to enter your questions at any time, and we'll cover as much as we're able to in the hour. So go ahead and send those in through our Q&A function instead of the chat. That'll help us kind of keep track of the questions a little bit better. And we'll try and get to as many of your questions as we can in the time allowed. The presentation will probably go 25 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for full Q&A at that point. Hopefully we'll knock off a lot of your questions along the way, but for anything that's outstanding, we'll take as many questions as we can the rest of the way. So I'll start with just kind of a quick background on myself, and then let Scott do an introduction on his background as well. So today we're talking about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I was a 2012 MBA student here at Notre Dame, and then moved into the brand management space for about 4 years. So, you know, this is kind of where I put my career flag before returning to university a couple of years ago. So it's, you know, something that I've had some good exposure to. And for my money, I think brand management kind of gets undersold sometimes. It's really one of the most comprehensive business experiences that you'll get. And we'll kind of talk about why that is as we're going through.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. And as Joe mentioned, I'm Scott, and I'm the marketing-focused career coach within Graduate Business Career Services. Prior to joining Mendoza, I was actually a career coach at Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business, working with MBAs focused on marketing and pursuing many of the roles that we'll be talking about today, brand management, product management, sales, and things like that. Prior to that, I have had some experience in HR and staffing, and started my career in higher ed. So coming to Business Career Services was a great move, and something I've thoroughly enjoyed, and look forward to telling all of you a little bit more about marketing as a career option.
All right, so I'm going to turn the camera off on us, so you don't have to look at our mugs, but can focus on the presentation here as we go through. So we'll jump right in, give you kind of a quick sense of where we're headed here. We'll start with a little overview of kind of marketing, what that's all about, and what some of the roles look like. As you're going through the MBA program, what type of academic preparation you'll have and makes the most sense to pursue to be able to set yourself up appropriately for it. And then talk a little bit about kind of the recruiting and the employment piece here as you're going through the MBA program, looking to get into roles in marketing. So we'll start with kind of that high level, what's marketing? So Scott, I'll turn over to you and kind of let you run through that.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. And yeah, we like to start off by just looking at marketing as a function and really defining it. Because I think for a lot of students coming into business school, they're certainly familiar with marketing. Many of you may have taken an introductory marketing course as an undergrad, or potentially even worked in marketing. But what I've found over the years is that sometimes students don't quite understand how broad marketing is as a function when we're talking about careers. And one of the things that we're going to try to do today is to really show you all of the different avenues that MBAs can look at in terms of a marketing career. So in terms of what marketing is, well, this is just a basic kind of definition that you'd see in Webster, in the dictionary. Marketing is creating, communicating, and delivering offerings that have value for customers or consumers or users so that ultimately you can drive revenue. So I think that's a definition that makes sense to most people, but I'd like to get even more kind of granular and sum it up in one word. And if, Joe, you can go to the next slide, I think the easiest way to think about marketing is what you're looking at in front of you. It is all about the customer. Everything that's done by a marketer, no matter if you're a brand manager, a product manager, if you're doing more outbound marketing like sales, if you're doing more inbound marketing, or doing customer analytics or consumer insights, at the end of the day, everything that goes into that is to deliver an outstanding and unparalleled experience for your customers. So your customers will then go and tell all their friends and family what a great experience they had, and you'll get even more customers. And at the end of the day, it's about driving growth, driving revenue through the acquisition of new customers. So if you think about marketing along those lines, I think it'll open up a lot of doors and a lot of pathways to some potential career options. So it's not just about creative advertising, or it's not just about marketing a good or a service. It's really about the entire experience and the entire landscape and everything that goes into producing that outstanding and unparalleled customer experience.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. From my experience, having an incredible focus on the customer is part of what helps a marketer be really successful. I think a lot of times on the outside, folks think about marketing as advertising, what we would actually think of as advertising, and they're entirely different from that standpoint. It's a lot more about your consumer insights. It's about delivering that value for the customer, like Scott said, but thinking about what some of those key drivers are, whether it's how you position your product, what your specific customer segment looks like, and making sure that you're delivering on that brand promise as you go through. So, as Scott mentioned, there's a lot of different ways to kind of think about marketing. I think kind of one of the big ones in the MBA space that we talk about a lot is brand management. This is my experience as I've gone through. One of the things that we always talked about for brand management is, we call it the hub of the wheel. So for most, particularly CPG companies, they're going to use a brand management style approach. And as a brand manager, you're really that one person that touches everything related to that brand. So you're going to be working with all the different functions that you see listed here, and you've got to be that person that knows everything about everything. So it's really a job that requires you to employ a lot of different skill sets as you're going through. You've got to be able to walk out of a meeting with finance folks and walk into a meeting with your PR folks, and then walk out of that meeting and talk to your sales folks that are on the road. And just be able to transition from one thing to the next. So, for me, it's kind of the quintessential business management experience, because you're touching every piece of it.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Joe. And as you look at this visual, brand management, being at the center of this universe, you really you're coordinating the activities of all of these different functions. And so you have to be fairly fluent in all of these things, finance, ops, sales, supply chain, market research, legal and regulatory, R&D, and probably even a few that aren't even listed here. You really are, as Joe said, you're the general manager of your particular brand. And in addition to being referred to as the hub of the wheel, another common term that's used to describe brand management, sometimes mini CEO. You really are the chief executive of your particular brand. And you're accountable for the success and the failure of that particular brand or product. But it really starts with that coordination of really understanding all of these different roles and the interplay between these and everything that goes in to making sure that that brand is successful. Starts with a brand manager's ability to understand all of these things and coordinate all of these activities in an efficient, successful way.
The CEO point is a good one too. Did a study a couple of years back on where Fortune 500 CEOs come from, and they actually found that more Fortune 500 CEOs came from doing brand management at P&G than from any single academic institution. So if you think about that as kind of CEO training, that kind of hits on it right there. And I think the other thing that goes kind of hand in hand with that is the leadership piece of it. So as you think about what it takes to be successful in this role, you've got to be able to work with a lot of different folks that don't necessarily work for you, but influence them appropriately to be able to get your objectives accomplished along the way. All right, so the other kind of big bucket that we talk about a lot in the marketing space for MBAs is product management. And this is kind of a little bit of a different spin on it. I'd say more typically you're going to see product managers in the tech space and in the healthcare space. Maybe a couple other spots Scott can round out for us. But it's a little bit different in terms of the structure of kind of how the ownership for your brand or your product works as you go through the life cycle.
Yeah, and as we're looking at this visual, this is just another depiction of similar to the hub of the wheel. As you can see, the product manager is really at the top of all of this and has reach all the way from the very beginning, the inception of this product or this feature, coordinating with R&D and engineering and design, who's actually building and crafting and kind of defining, well, what is the customer's need, what is the user need, and how do we construct a product or a feature that meets that need. And then as we move along this life cycle and we get closer to that outbound side that eventually is leading to that customer satisfaction piece, that customer experience, we see some of these other avenues that a PM has to be aware of and fluent in, and again, coordinating the activities of. Analytics and insights, this is a huge emerging area. We can talk a little bit more about this at the end of the presentation, but today's marketers have to understand the role that data is playing in this customer journey, in this life cycle. And gone are the days of anecdotal or gut decisions when it comes to, what do you think customers are going to respond to? What, in terms of our creative and our ad campaigns, what do we think is going to make the most impact? Increasingly, these are data-driven decisions. And as a marketer, whether you're in brand or product, you have to know how to use data. You have to know how to kind of get the data and understand how these insights were developed. But most importantly, you're the storyteller. You're the person that's really bringing those insights to senior leaders and saying, this is what we have to do. We're going to base our go-to-market strategy on a lot of new insights we uncovered from this data that we were looking at. So then from there, we get into product marketing and business development and sales, which even within those areas, you're seeing more and more MBA roles specifically in those areas. So that's another thing to consider. You can be a brand manager, you can be a product manager, but you could also be a product marketing manager. You could also be in sales or business development and not be owning the life cycle, just owning kind of a smaller component of it, the more outbound side. But these are comparable careers that pay comparable salaries and have comparable responsibilities and career progression. So just another thing to think about as you're looking at a career in marketing. There's a lot of different ways you can go. But yeah, our product marketers and our sales teams and our biz dev, they're not responsible for defining and constructing the product or feature. They're responsible for getting it out to market. And a PM, owning this full life cycle has to really understand, how to best enable their sales teams and their biz dev teams to get these out to market, working hand in hand with the product marketing manager, getting that feedback from the customer that then goes back into that R&D and design phase. And you hear a lot about product managers and brand managers kind of talking to the customer and the voice of the customer. Well, that's done through the feedback and the data that they're gaining from the marketplace in terms of the success of that product or brand, what changes need to be made. So it really is this kind of continuous loop of feedback that informs future changes and directions in terms of where that product or brand is going.
Yeah, I'll say from my experience too, I think probably one of the things that surprised me the most is how much time as a brand manager I spent on the phone with my sales team. We had, I was working in the wine industry, we had salespeople in all 50 states, and that feedback loop, seeing what's on the ground and what reaction there is in the marketplace, what their customers are saying about it, what the end user is saying about it. That's a really essential piece because you got to be able to set them up for success. Otherwise, you're not going to have success either. So, again, that kind of plays into that big range of skill sets that you need for really either of these roles or any of the roles that go within the marketing space.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good point to maybe pause and see if there's any questions on either of those visuals, on either of those depictions of what brand and product look like. So if anybody has any questions on that, please let us know now, or if not, we can just continue out the presentation.
Let's
Sure,
keep going. Feel free,
yeah.
send in your questions again at any point as we run through. And will definitely kind of help clarify. So again, this is just kind of a different way to hit on the kind of core differences between brand managers and PMs. As we kind of touched on here, kind of high level overview, just more or less the same in a little bit of a different format.
Yeah, exactly. And just to touch on what we've already talked about, brand management is typically synonymous with the consumer packaged goods or the consumer products industry. So food and beverage, cosmetics, home and garden, typically those are where you're going to be coming in as a brand manager and managing a specific brand, big picture strategy, brand equity, brand and product benefits. You shift over to the product management world, that's really synonymous with the tech industry. But as Joe mentioned, there's a few other industries, healthcare, even automotive, and some traditional consumer packaged goods companies might even sometimes have some type of product leader as well. But not a lot of huge differences. I think the core themes are the same, that you really are the hub of that wheel. You have profit and loss responsibility for the most part with your brand or product. And as we'll see in a few slides from here, a lot of the same core competencies in terms of the skills you'll need apply to both of these roles.
The P&L point is a great one too. As you think about your career and your responsibilities, I had a great conversation with one of my classmates who went into consulting. He worked for BCG for 4 years and then transitioned into a private label food company in a general manager role. And we were kind of chatting, and I said, well, what do you really want to get out of this? What do you feel like is missing? What's the next step? And his response was, I've never managed a P&L. And this is, 4 years post MBA. And I said, they handed me one day one on my job and said, this is yours, you own it, you're responsible for everything in there. So, as a brand manager, you're the one that's sitting in front of the CEO that's, explaining either why you're way up and making them a lot of money or why you're way down and losing the company a lot of money. So that's, again, it's a really great ability to be able to kind of see the business as a whole and think about yourself more as a general manager of your business as opposed to, just owning a specific function. So in terms of kind of setting yourself up for success, there's a couple different things. Scott touched on, some of the skills that are really essential here. I think the one that's really becoming more and more and more essential as we go through is business analytics and data skills. If you think about what moves the customer, it's all driven off of consumer insights, and there's an incredible amount of data that's available about customers and their habits in this day and age. And so being able to draw insights from that, tie that back to your strategy and your positioning and your tactics along the way is essential. So within the MBA program here, we offer 7 different concentrations. Students can have 2 different concentrations as they go through the program. So a lot of folks going into brand management will double up and they'll do, either marketing as kind of their primary concentration, and then add on either business analytics for that data skill set, or a lot of folks will also look at consulting. If you think about kind of that general management tool bag, that skill set is also very valuable. You're going to get into things like budgeting and forecasting that may show up in a little bit of a different way than some of your traditional academic marketing or business analytics classes. That's definitely a core component as you're going through and operating your brand or your product as you're going through, being able to project out into the future what your impacts will have and what that does to the company's bottom line is a core function. So those 3, any mix of those 3 concentrations will give you kind of a nice foundation for each of those different skills. And of course, with elective flexibility, you can always kind of cherry pick other things along the way that you think kind of help to round out any gaps in your skill set that you might have there.
Yeah, as we look at the skills, I think there's some common themes across a lot of these roles, and particularly with the first 2, leadership and communications, which sound incredibly broad and in general, but they really are the hallmarks of effective brand and product leaders. Remember, you're leading this cross-functional group or this team, and you're really setting the vision for where you want your product or brand to go. And as we talked about, coordinating the activities of all of these other very different functions. But that next key piece is the communications piece. And it's a different kind of communication, because one thing you have to realize about being a brand or product manager, you own the brand, but you don't have direct line authority over all of those different elements of the brand or of the product life cycle. So you're really leading through influence. You know, supply chain doesn't roll up to you, engineering doesn't roll up to you. But make no mistake, you have to really gain their buy-in and get them to execute on your vision. And you have to do that without having direct authority over them. And it's something that it's both an art and a science, this ability to influence without direct authority. And I think it's one of the most fundamentally important parts of being a brand or product manager, that in many ways is more important than kind of the content knowledge you bring or the domain experience. I've worked with a lot of MBA students that have gone into brand or product roles, having very little direct experience in that field, but launched incredibly successful careers because of their ability to really lead and influence without formal authority. So it's just something to really keep in mind as you embark on this. And then when we drill down a little bit more into those skills and strategy development, I mean, these are incredibly strategic roles, and you're going to be responsible for day-to-day strategy, but also much longer-term strategy in terms of the direction of your brand or product. So that's where that consulting concentration, you know, there's a very, very big strategy component to these. And then we get into the nuts and bolts of that data piece that Joe was talking about, you know, data visualization, forecasting, budgeting, just the ability to work with data across a number of different areas that's going to inform, you know, what these strategic decisions that you're making are going to be. So it really is this nice blend of you know, both art and science in terms of your overall skill set. And, you know, one exercise that all of you can do on your own very simply is just start to read some job descriptions of brand managers and product managers across a number of different industries. And I think what you'll find is you'll see a lot of these key skills and competencies. You know, they may be, they might not be verbatim, but you'll see this blend of leadership, communication, and comfort with data as you go through those.
Yeah, so in my experience, you know, I was working as a brand manager in the wine industry, and so I told people what I did, and you could always see it in their eyes. Their immediate thought was that, you know, I'm standing in the vineyard while somebody is pouring me a glass of wine and we're filming a commercial. You know, my day-to-day reality is I spent most of my day on the phone and looking at spreadsheets. You know, so as you get into kind of the reality of how that works, yes, absolutely, there were plenty of days where I was out in the vineyard drinking wine, but there were a lot more days when I was sitting at my desk, you know, doing some forecasting, doing some budgeting.
Drinking wine while looking at the spreadsheet?
Sometimes. Again, that's a fun space to be in. So, you know, there's some side perks to your specific consumer good that you work with. All right, so some nuts and bolts here. You know, one of the big things that folks are always thinking about is kind of that end result, the big old JOB on the back end, and kind of what that looks like. So, Scott, I'll let you talk a little bit to kind of placement where our students have gone both from internships and full-time, and kind of what that looks like here at Mendoza.
Yeah, and I wanted to just give a snapshot and looking at the most recent data we have, and you'll see that marketing and sales roles are a real strength of Mendoza's. In terms of internships, 32% of our students last year accepted internships in a marketing or sales role, and $6,300 a month in terms of the median salary. And those, again, were very, they're all under the larger umbrella of marketing. So you saw brand manager interns, you saw product management, product marketing interns, you saw interns as part of sales programs, these feeder programs into post-MBA sales world. You saw more data-driven marketing analytics or customer insights types of internships. So as these roles increasingly become more broad, you're seeing more pathways to different marketing careers. And same thing for full-time, 22%, so just over a fifth of our students accepting roles in marketing and sales, and $110,000 average starting salary. So very competitive, very strong salaries. And as Joe mentioned, particularly with brand and product roles, these are incredible programs to really understand the depth and scale at which these companies operate, and you're being groomed in a lot of ways to be a senior leader. So from a career progression standpoint, it really is a nice way to start a post-MBA career.
So I think two other key points to kind of make here as we're thinking about it. We're talking, the internship is something that is part of your standard 2-year MBA experience. I would say kind of typically it's much more challenging to get into particularly the brand management space out of the 1-year program, because you don't have the benefit of that internship, and these companies tend to hire a little bit more heavily from their internship programs, or at the very least they want you to have that exposure because of all those different skill sets that we talked about. So that is something to think about, even if you've got a little bit of a background in in business, maybe you're working for an ad company or something like that now. The 2-year program is still going to probably set you up a little bit better for a brand management or product management role, just because of that internship opportunity. It's not unattainable in the 1-year program, but it's a little bit more challenging from that standpoint. The other big point that I'll make here too, that goes kind of hand in hand with salary, is geography. And we'll jump ahead to the next slide here too. You can see where some of our students go. I think one of the things that's always kind of important to call out from geography standpoint, and how that relates back to the money, is there's a lot of really great brand management roles that are either outside of the coasts or outside of kind of your big cities. One of my classmates went to go work for Kimberly-Clark in Wisconsin right after graduation, and it's small town Wisconsin, so I get it. It's not for everybody, but $95,000 or $100,000 in Appleton, Wisconsin goes a heck of a lot farther than $125,000 in Seattle or San Francisco. So, that's part of your equation as well. I'd say kind of historically, a lot of these, big CPG brand companies tend to be located in the Midwest. It's not exclusive to that, but there's kind of a higher concentration. You've got great headquarters in Wisconsin. There's a lot in Chicago. A lot of those are moving right down into the loop. You've got Kraft, you've got Mondelez, you've got Miller Coors down there as well. And then you've got P&G in Cincinnati as well. Abbott's kind of splits between Columbus, and AbbVie up in Chicago suburbs too. So there's some good opportunities in the Midwest. There's plenty that are out there on the coasts and some other areas of the country as well. You got lay down in Texas, which is always a big one. We had interns with Pepsi out in New York this summer as well. So there's kind of a good mix from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. And this is just kind of high-level career advice, regardless of what you're pursuing, is to be open-minded about where you land. And I think it's common for MBA students to come in and really have 1 or 2 destinations in mind, and really say, well, it's got to be in one of these places, which I think is great. And I think, you're making a big investment in yourself, and you want to certainly land in a place that you're comfortable in. But as Joe said, there's some great opportunities out there in some cities and metros that you may not have considered. And life is short, but your career is going to be quite long, I think you'll find. And sometimes starting out in a place, whether it's Omaha, Nebraska, or as Joe said, Wisconsin, or just an area totally different than you expected, can be a great way to really get that few years of experience, particularly as a brand manager, and really gain some leadership experience coupled with that top-tier MBA. And then it's going to allow you to pivot into maybe one of those more preferred markets. So just something to keep in mind as you embark on your business school experience.
All right. So one of the things that I think is really important to talk about, and some of these are pretty recent too, is through the program, how do you set yourself up to go into one of these roles? How do you make some of those connections and get started? There's a couple different support pieces that go along with that. Obviously, Scott, you and your team do a lot, and another great support is the marketing club here. The marketing club does a lot in terms of working with industry representatives to come and talk about their roles, getting out to the companies and really getting on the ground, seen kind of a little bit more what it's like and getting a sense. So the club helps facilitate that. Scott, talk a little bit too about how your team facilitates that and kind of what that looks like.
Absolutely, and what you're looking at is some visuals, some pictures of some recent employer tracks that we took, and those are a big part of the MBA experience. And as Joe said, clubs play a big role in that, as do career services departments. And oftentimes it's the clubs and career services working in conjunction to both bring employers in, but also to really go and experience these companies from an insider's perspective. And these are some pictures of some very recent industry tracks with a marketing focus. Last Friday, we went out to Chicago and visited a number of different companies, exploring what these companies are doing in terms of analytics. And one of those was Pepsi. And we were able to hear from Pepsi's head of advanced analytics and how they're using machine learning and advanced analytics to really gain some of these insights that are going to inform the decisions they're making in terms of meeting their customers' needs. And then we also went to the Bay Area to visit some technology companies, Walmart e-commerce being one of those, and Marketo, for those of you who don't know, is a marketing automation software company that was recently acquired by Adobe. And just seeing the different technologies that both empower marketers to do their jobs better, in the case of Marketo, but also Walmart, a huge surge into the e-commerce space. So, hearing from category managers, hearing from people working in analytics, and seeing some of the things that are going on at Walmart e-commerce as they really attempt to compete with Amazon in the e-commerce space. So that's a big part of your experience is really connecting with employers in a number of different ways, not just in interviews and job fairs, but also through these on-campus and off-campus engagements.
The picture at Marketo kind of reminded me of one other point to make too. If we back up here, these are all pretty major companies with big brands that you've heard of that operate on a national and a global scale. There are lots of great opportunities at the MBA level for brands you might not have heard of at all. I guarantee that you probably are not familiar with all the brands that I worked on in my career. That's not a bad thing, but the experience was still fantastic. So, it's great to have kind of some target companies, some brands that you want to work for, but be open to some of the other opportunities that pop up along the way too, because, there can be really great work and really great companies that you might not have even heard of that play in this space, or something that doesn't necessarily sound sexy, but is actually a really great job. Something like Scott's Miracle-Gro. Who wants to sell lawn fertilizer, right? It's not sexy, but it's a great job and it's a great experience from a brand management standpoint. And still the opportunity to touch billion-dollar businesses with things that are not soft drinks, snack foods, things like that kind of fall under your more typical common everyday household items.
And that's a great point, Joe. And speaking of Scott's Miracle-Gro, one of our recent alums that came back to campus to speak to our students as part of MBA orientation, when that's one of the first times you'll hear from alums that have really been successful in these roles and these functions. Well, this particular alum started at Scott's Miracle-Gro, and after I believe it was 2 or 3 years, pivoted to Kraft Heinz in Chicago as in a more senior level brand management role. So it's a perfect example of what we were talking about, how be open-minded about where that first opportunity is. Another good example is one of our senior alums who spent a number of years at Tyson Foods, recently made the jump over to Google, of all places. So it shows you, once you build up some of that capital, that experience, you're able to make these quantum leaps from one company to another, from one industry to another, from one location to another. So those are just some real-time examples of what those pivots look like, and your ability to make those pivots once you gain some experience.
All right, a couple of housekeeping things here from my end, and then we'll finish up with all the questions, all the Q&A here. So for those of you that are able to come and meet us in person, a couple different things. We've got some opportunities coming up. For any vets that are out there, I will be at the Service Academy Career Conference in San Antonio, November 1st and 2nd. Got to put a plug in here. One of the things that CPG companies and brand companies in general love is leadership, and Vet's absolutely crushed that. So, it's maybe not something that you're thinking about from that standpoint, but it's a great way to go. Our team will also be traveling to the Inside the NBA events. We'll be in Atlanta, Charlotte, and Raleigh the week of November 5th, and then we'll be in Austin, Houston, and Dallas the week of November 12th. So it's a great way to meet some of us face-to-face, get some more of your questions answered about the program in general. We also have a couple of on-campus events coming up if you can make it out here. It's a really great way to kind of get a feel for the program, meet with some current students, and really get a sense of what life is like here in South Bend. So we've got our Domer for a Day, which is our kind of full-scale preview day. It's a pretty robust schedule for that. That's going to be on November 2nd, which is a Friday, and next Friday, actually. Wow, that's sneaking up. And then we've got our standard Football Friday information session on November 9th. So if anybody's thinking about coming up and watching us beat Florida State, you can swing by for the Football Friday session at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the 9th as well. I want to give everyone a heads up on our next webinar. We've got kind of a quick turn for the next one. I'm going to be talking with another one of our career coaches, Megan Gallagher, and we're going to be talking about careers in technology. So, we touched on a couple opportunities here today in the tech space. We'll talk about technology more as an industry on Tuesday and some of the different opportunities that are available there. Over the last couple of years here at Mendoza, 25 to 30% of our students in a given year are going into the tech space in one of a different number of different types of roles. And so we'll kind of outline what some of those opportunities look like, and again, how the program sets you up for success there. The last thing from my standpoint is for those of you getting ready to submit an application sometime in the near future, we're going to throw you a fee waivers, and thank you for joining us today. You can type in Irish Web as all one word into the application fee waiver spot on your application, and we'll go ahead and waive that $175 application fee for you. So that's kind of just a little extra thank you. So with that, we'll kind of transition into the Q&A, and we've got about 20 minutes here, so we'll get through as many questions as you have and as you want in that time frame, and keep sending them in as we go along, and we'll get to as much as we can. So we'll start off here. First question, for the two-year students that are coming out of their internships, do most of them accept a full-time job at the company that they interned with in the summertime?
Yeah, I'd say it's about half and half, and I'll say that that's probably a similar ratio across top business schools. And you'll see a number of different kind of scenarios. Students may get an offer from the company and accept it. They may get an offer but decide that that was a great experience, but I'd like to maybe pursue something else, or look at a different function entirely, or look at a different area that I want to live in. And others, they may not get an offer, and they have to pivot from there. And that doesn't mean necessarily that they did anything wrong per se. Sometimes it's just it's not a fit for a number of different reasons, or the hiring team just maybe went through some changes and isn't in a position to make an offer immediately, and they may tell that candidate, well, we're waiting on some more information on headcount, or some changes are being made. So just hang with us, and we may be able to make an offer a little bit later in the calendar year. But that student will continue to pursue other opportunities in the fall as well. So yes, I'd say anytime you go into a brand management role in particular, conversion is absolutely the goal. And these companies, as Joe said, they're bringing in interns with every intention of making an offer if it is deemed a fit. But I'd say in any given year, 50-50, 60-40, and that's pretty common across the business school landscape.
So I'll say too, going through the full-time interview process, as a second year when I went through, I got a lot of questions about my internship, and so they were very interested in the work that I had done in my internship, even though it was with a different company. So it's definitely kind of a key component to that full-time recruiting, regardless of if you're taking that offer straight out, or using one of the other examples that Scott mentioned here. That internship plays a critical role in that full-time recruiting either way, depending on how that goes.
But one of your primary goals certainly should always be to convert, and the vast majority of these internship opportunities, and that is the goal, is to bring you on full-time. and our students have had a great track record of success, from their internships.
All right. Next question here, talking about the MBA, MSBA dual degree program. In terms of the students that are in that, how do they profile for marketing roles? Are students in that program pursuing marketing roles? What does that look like for us right now?
Yeah, I think those students profile very well across a number of different functions, and marketing included. And here's why, and this is something we touched on earlier, is that everything, we are living in a data-driven world. And whether it's marketing, consulting, operations, general management, finance, the MBAs have to increasingly be analytical. And I think whether it's coming in as a dual MBA, MSBA, coming in as an MBA with a concentration in analytics, or coming in just as an MBA that's not doing anything formally in the analytics space, but maybe just taking some electives to hone up on their data skills. These employers increasingly want MBAs that are analytical. And I think the MSBA, MBA dual degree program aligns very well if you're looking to really get into more of the insights side and not being a brand manager, but having a leadership role in the shopper or customer insights side of things, where you're really straddling both worlds. You're working with analytics teams. You're working with people that are actually running the data and working with incredibly large volumes of data to determine trends and patterns and producing these insights. But then your job and the value you bring as an MBA is you understand the business implications of that data and of those insights. And you can then bring those insights to senior leadership or to brand and product managers and say, this is actually where we need to go. We're a little bit off here, and our customers are telling us things that we haven't been listening to. So yeah, I think the MSBA and MBA is a really powerful combination across a number of different functions, but certainly marketing.
The one thing I will say with the dual degree program, with having a fairly rigid structure to accomplish both degrees, it will cut down a little bit on your ability to take some of those other electives that may come into it. It's a little more challenging to have a concentration outside of business analytics if you're doing the dual degree program. So if you want to do a lot of kind of those academic marketing classes, or if you want to take a lot of classes in the consulting space, those opportunities are a little more limited from that standpoint. But again, as Scott said, if you're looking at working with a data team, if you're getting into consumer analytics or market research, that's a great skill set to be able to have to go into that. And you've got those core business fundamentals to be able to be that translator from your hard data teams into those core business leaders. So I think another question, and this kind of pops up with every career-focused webinar that we do, for international students looking at getting into the space, what do the opportunities look like? Especially brand versus product, and if you're thinking about one of those paths, where are kind of the best opportunities, where are our students going there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think generally speaking, for the marketing-focused international student, it may be a smarter decision to focus more on the technology side and looking at some of those product roles or analytics roles within the technology space. It's not impossible to get sponsored by a CPG company, but you have a much stronger likelihood, I think, in the technology industry. And I think the technology webinar may touch on that a little bit more, but that is just historically, I think you're going to see larger numbers in terms of H-1B sponsorship and the willingness for companies to do that. But I always encourage international students that are marketing focused. A couple of events that we didn't really talk about much here, but will absolutely be on your radars no matter where you go to business school if you're focusing on marketing, are the early career fairs, National Black and Prospanica, and where you'll see a very large collection of CPG companies there to talk with MBAs, to talk about openings. And there have been international students that have gone to those and used it as an opportunity to really connect with employers. And there are instances where an international student if they can really align their skills with what the company is looking for, they may be able to land within a CPG company. But just looking at the hiring cycles over the past several years, I think the better approach is to target industries that have a stronger willingness and ability to sponsor H-1Bs, and that would be technology.
Good follow-up question here. With the dual degree, does that come with a STEM designation? Yes, it does, and that does have implications for your work authorization. So with that STEM designation, students that have that can apply for 2 additional years of OPT on the student visa. So your work authorization from your student visa can be up to 3 years. So again, that kind of changes the equation a little bit if you're going out and looking, you don't need sponsorship within that space. So it does kind of, change the perception on that just a little bit.
And just one thing to add, just going back to the H-1B sponsorship, more and more you're seeing companies really make these decisions on a case-by-case basis. So I get this question a lot as a career coach, what companies definitely sponsor and what companies don't. I think there's a lot more gray area, and companies will look at the applicant pool and what they need from a hiring standpoint. And if they're just not finding the talent in the current applicant pool, they very well may consider sponsorship and open things up. So my advice is, if you're really interested in marketing, is to come in and keep the top of the funnel very wide, and don't necessarily rule out CPG companies. Because if you have experience in that industry and you have a willingness and a desire to really understand what that employer needs, exceptions are made to these policies all the time. So just wanted to add that.
All right. So we've got a good question here about work-life balance from a couple different angles here. Both from kind of in the program in general, in terms of kind of how that layers in as you're going through the career search process, and then what that looks like on the job. So I'll kind of start with, with the program in general, kind of how folks manage their time. Everybody does that a little bit differently. So folks are coming in from a lot of different perspectives as they're coming into life. So you've got some folks that have, a spouse and kids, and that changes the equation a little bit. You've got some folks that are, kind of footloose and fancy free and, staying up all hours of the night. Everybody kind of sets their own, kind of standard operating procedure as they go through. I know a lot of folks that have, families and, more specific family considerations there will just treat it like a job. You come to school, you're in class, roughly 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. Is kind of your average, and then you spend the rest of those hours going through doing your homework, getting your group work done, doing your career prep and everything like that, and then you go home and and you do your home life. Some folks will love the flexibility of school, and they'll throw all their classes in the afternoon, sleep till noon, and play golf whenever they can, and then stay up till 3 in the morning, doing their homework and all that kind of stuff. Depends a little bit on kind of what you're looking to get out of it. I think from the program in general, there's kind of a couple main jobs. Obviously you've got to be successful academically, but that job search takes a lot of time. I think for me as a student, that was the thing that I kind of didn't anticipate is how much time I would throw into the job search in terms of doing my researching, doing my networking, things like that. It's not overwhelming. It's not undoable. There's a lot of support resources that go along with that. And it's kind of one of those things that you can tailor it to your specific situation and your needs on kind of when you need to get that done and how you need to get that done. In terms of kind of the work-life balance within the industry, honestly, part of it depends a little bit on your specific company culture and kind of how they're treating it. I've worked for some companies in the space that were pretty much an 8 to 5. Everybody kind of hit 5 o'clock and went home and said, hey, it'll be there tomorrow, and it was pretty relaxed. I've worked for other companies that had a very different approach to it from that standpoint, and so a lot of that depends on the individual company culture and their expectations, and frankly how much you're willing to give and push back on it. I'd say in general, brand is probably a lot friendlier to a family lifestyle than say consulting or investment banking, the hours tend to be less, and the amount of travel tends to be a lot less. So I'd say, if you're thinking about it from that standpoint in terms of kind of the broader impact on your lifestyle and your family, the balance is probably going to be a little friendlier within the brand management space. All right. Any other questions out there? We'll give you another minute here to shoot anything in. And then if not, we'll go ahead and kind of wrap up. We'll have a number of other webinars throughout November before we get into our round 2 deadlines. So we'll have a couple with some of our current students to talk about their experiences here in the program, a couple that are going to be more general for kind of overall student life here, and then some that are going to be targeted a little bit more at some special groups here. Okay, another question, and we've got a couple more minutes, so if you've got other questions, feel free to jump in here. So for kind of going back to the analytics piece again a little bit, concentration versus dual degree or possibly a standalone MSBA. If you're looking for leadership roles in the near future, what kind of makes the most sense?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very individual decision. And I think the MBA is an all-purpose kind of degree is never a bad choice. I think MBAs bring in a lot of career changers that are looking to explore a number of different potential career paths. So I think if you're open to some different things and you're really looking at the next 1 or 2 years as an opportunity to kind of realign your priorities, look at what you've done and how that can be applied to a number of different areas, I think the MBA makes sense. I mean, if you're coming in and you're fairly certain that you want to get in something within the analytics space, and maybe aren't as interested in the broader business-focused leadership opportunities like brand management and potentially continuing on that path into a more maybe C-level position down the road. I mean, you certainly could be able to maybe carve out that path with just an MSBA, but I think the MSBA by definition is a specialized master's, which is going to usually bring in students that really want to narrow their options down to that one path. As far as whether it's the dual degree or the MBA with the concentration in analytics, as I said, I think that's just opening even more doors for you as an MBA and kind of getting ahead of the game in a sense, because I do think down the road, just again, MBAs are going to increasingly need to be able to work with data, and it's a pretty good combination from that standpoint. So I think your job as the candidate is to really think about, okay, what is the goal? What's the end goal in terms of going back to school and where I want to land, and base the decision off of your own insights into that.
I think the other thing from a leadership point too is, in the MBA program, there's kind of a high emphasis on that. We've got specialized leadership development programs that go hand in hand with the MBA, and as a 2-year program, you have a lot of ability to have hands-on leadership opportunities, either through our student government or through the club system as well. So those are great opportunities to get on the ground and say, hey, I want to make something happen in the next 6 months or a year, and to execute on it. So they're good proof points from that standpoint. So if you're thinking about using the program as a way to kind of expand your leadership and help develop your leadership style, the MBA is probably going to set up a little bit more favorably for that than just a standalone MSBA would. Just part of it's because of time, part of it's because of opportunity, and part of it's because of focus. It's got a little bit more of that kind of general management, general leadership focus than a specialized master's would have. All right. Well, it looks like we're done on the questions here. So thanks again for everybody for joining us. We've got recordings of all the past webinars up on the website. So if you've missed any along the way, feel free to jump on there and have a watch. We'll continue to update as we do the other webinars throughout the fall. So check back in periodically if you're not able to join us specifically for any of those. And of course, if you've got any questions along the way about the admissions process, Life at Notre Dame, anything else, want to talk football, I'm happy to talk football. Just reach out to us. You can always email mba.business@indy.edu or give us a call here on campus. Thanks so much for joining us today. Glad you made it out, and hopefully you learned a little bit more about marketing and some of the opportunities within the MBA program here. All right, take care, everybody. Have a great day.